Judge Elijah Brooks stood tall, the black robe draping down to his ankles, smooth as a stage curtain just drawn back. He removed his glasses and set them gently on the old oak bench, one that had borne witness to hundreds of lives passing beneath the heel of justice. In front of him stood Sergeant Daniel Crowley and Officer Nathan Hale, their police uniforms suddenly looking out of place, as if they belonged to a world no longer aligned with the reality now laid bare. Their faces were lowered, throats tensed like they were trying to swallow something heavy, yet their eyes refused to rise, not from shame, but from fear. Fear of meeting the gaze of the man they had once slammed to the supermarket floor, a man they hadn't bothered to identify, hadn't even asked his name. Elijah spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it was hard as forged steel. "I recognize you." Silence dropped over the room like a funeral shroud just unfolded. No one breathed. No one moved. Not a single chair creaked. Not a single paper rustled. He tilted his head, squinting as if looking back through a fogged window at that night. But in his eyes was the cold, sharp edge of truth. "Before you twisted my arms behind my back, you should have learned to recognize a human being before they had a chance to show you their credentials. No shouting, no banging on the bench, no challenge. Just a reminder, but one that carried the weight of a verdict. Before we dive into this tense journey of justice, power, and accountability, take a moment to imagine what it's like to be treated like a criminal just because you exist, because you're wearing a hoodie, because your skin is dark. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you believe everyone deserves to be treated fairly under the law. Now let's go back to where it all began. Philadelphia, Tuesday night. A spring rain thin as smoke. Streetlights blurred by water, human silhouettes stretching out like blades slicing the city open. The city wasn't sleeping, but it wasn't welcoming either. Elijah, 46, wasn't a judge that night. Just a tired son after 9 hours sitting in Einstein Hospital, where his 73-year-old mother, Lorraine Brooks, had just come out of a life-or-death heart surgery. The doctors said she'd be okay. But doctors always say that, and Elijah knew well. Okay is sometimes just a way to hold someone together while the truth breaks beneath them. He stopped by Fairmart, a 24-hour supermarket not far from the hospital. Elijah wanted to pick up some fruit, a few packets of instant oatmeal, a bottle of raw honey, and a fresh bouquet of lavender, which his mother always placed on her table each morning. He was dressed simply, worn jeans, a gray sweater, and over it a charcoal hoodie, just a practical choice. Until it was redefined by the gaze of others. No one in the store knew he was a judge, and Elijah didn't need them to. He pushed his cart past the bread aisles where the smell of baked butter mixed with cheap disinfectant, creating a kind of warmth that felt fake. He was bending down to grab some milk when he heard the heavy stomp of police boots on cold tile. Slow, steady, confident, alert. It wasn't just a sound. It was a signal. Sergeant Crowley and Officer Hale entered like two men sweeping a battlefield. Both young, broad-shouldered, close-cropped hair, guns at their hips, eyes not waiting for a story, only scanning for a weak point to strike. Crowley glanced sideways, eyes sweeping the shelves like a radar scanning for targets. When his gaze landed on Elijah, he stopped. Black male. Hoodie, medium build. "Matches the West Grove description," he said loud enough for Hale to hear. "You sure?" Sure enough, not to need to ask. Elijah heard them. Every word, every syllable. They didn't fall on his ears. They sank straight into his gut, burning like a deep wound not yet blistered. He didn't turn. His hand still held the milk. But when the footsteps stopped just behind him, Elijah slowly turned, his eyes steady, only tired. "Good evening," Crowley said. His tone wasn't exactly hostile, but definitely not polite. "We got a report of a suspicious individual. Can you show some ID?" Elijah gave a slight nod, then asked, without raising his voice, "What's the specific reason?" "Matches a suspect's description. Black, hoodie, male." Hale answered like he was reading off a script. Elijah gave a faint smile. "Like the kind you give when the answer's too old to hurt anymore. That description matches me, and about 10,000 other people in this city. Hale's hands tensed. Crowley narrowed his eyes. Elijah saw it, the moment the conversation was about to cross the line. I'm going to reach for my wallet. Slowly. What's your name? Elijah Brooks. I'm a judge at the Philadelphia Municipal Court. Crowley chuckled, not loudly, but with the kind of arrogance that comes from someone used to power and unbothered by the need to verify anything beyond their own assumptions. Oh, then I must be the president. Hands on the cart, now. Elijah didn't even have time to respond. Didn't get to pull out his wallet. A hard shove sent him forward. His shoulder slammed into the metal shelf, oatmeal boxes scattering across the floor. The honey bottle shattered, golden, syrup pooling like diluted blood. A sharp click followed. The E. Handcuffs snapped around his wrists like the chains of history repeating themselves. I didn't do anything! Elijah barked, his voice cracking not with fear, but with rage choking his throat like a hammer blow. Do not resist, Hale said, eyes unblinking like trying to erase himself from the consequences. Elijah saw the faces around him, white eyes, wide open but silent. Some turned away. Some held up phones. But no one stepped forward. No one asked, "What's going on here?" No one asked, "What did he do wrong?" Only him, pinned down, face pressed against the supermarket floor cold as the moon, arms twisted behind him, and his dignity smeared in the mix of metal and crushed green apples. Ever felt like your truth was dismissed because of how you looked, dressed, or spoke? Drop a comment below. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. Elijah couldn't tell which sound of shattering came first, the glass jar of honey falling from his shopping cart, or the cracking inside him as he was dragged away like a cheap product on clearance. His arms were wrenched behind his back, wrists stiff as stone, the metal cuffs freezing cold like they'd just come out of a freezer, branding their shape into his skin. No explanation, no chance to speak. Not a single kind gaze within a few feet of him, only silent avoidance, as if everyone was watching someone being sentenced in public and silently nodding in agreement through their quiet. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Officer Hale's voice echoed like it came from a TV show, flat and emotionless, like he was reciting the alphabet from memory. Elijah heard it but didn't. Saw what was happening but couldn't believe it. He, who had presided over hundreds of court cases, was now being treated like an anonymous man with no honor, no authority, no voice. The police car pulled out of the supermarket parking lot at 9:12 p.m. Rain began to fall heavier. Red and blue lights flickered through the rear patrol car window, casting blurry streaks across Elijah's eyes like faint cuts, slashing at his damaged pride. The Fairwood precinct was nothing special. A boxy, bland building painted a faded beige, with an American flag fluttering out front and the motto, "To protect and serve," stamped in cold metal letters above the revolving door. Inside, the fluorescent lighting gave off a ghostly glare like an old clinic. The air reeked of bleach, ink, and the dampness of souls dragged through this place, where justice came wrapped in protocol, power, and the murkiness of the situation. Name? Elijah Brooks. Spell it. E-L-I. Write it down. Hurry up. Stop dragging, Crowley cut in, his voice as flat as someone filing taxes. Hale was busy filling out the arrest report. Black male? Middle-aged, wearing hoodie, suspicious demeanor, refused to show ID, resisted during approach. Elijah caught a glimpse of the words from the side. Every line felt like a slap to reality, like an indictment penned by fogged mirrors that no longer reflected truth. I told you I'm a judge. Elijah spoke for the first time after nearly 15 minutes in custody. I have my professional ID in my wallet. You never checked it, so anyone who says they're a judge is just telling the truth, huh? Hale scoffed, not even looking up. Last month, some guy claimed he was a Harvard professor. Turns out he couldn't read. Elijah was ordered to remove his shoes, take off his belt, and place all personal belongings into a metal tray. When the duty officer picked up his wallet and examined it, Elijah saw his eyes freeze on the embossed card. Judicial ID, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Judge Elijah T. Brooks. There was a 3-second silence. Then, as if nothing had happened, the officer closed the wallet and slid it aside. All right, wait for the holding cell. No apology. No glance acknowledging a mistake. As if the truth had come too late, or wasn't enough to erase the twisted arm, the suspicious stares, or the lingering stench of humiliation still hanging in the air. Elijah sat in a small holding cell next to a skinny young man who looked barely 20, dressed in a crumpled baseball jersey. The kid glanced over at him, eyes holding something like respect, like empathy, like a kind of bond between people who shared an invisible reality, the reality of skin color and default suspicion. They said you're a judge for real? The kid whispered. Elijah nodded. The boy gave a crooked smile, bitter and strange. And they still cuffed you like nothing. Almost an hour later, the metal door creaked open. A young African-American officer stepped in with an odd demeanor, tense, awkward, like a man facing his father in the middle of something wrong. Judge Brooks? Elijah looked up. I'm Officer Avery Bennett. I heard you speak at the Philadelphia Police Academy last year, the lecture on civil rights. The air grew still. Bennett's eyes met Elijah's, not with pity but with shame on his behalf. I'll take you out now. There's been a serious misunderstanding. The captain wants to speak with you privately. As they stepped out of the holding cell, Elijah heard hurried footsteps down the hallway. In the office, a white man in his 50s, dressed in a sharp suit, was waiting, head of internal affairs for the city, flanked by a city attorney and a reporter from the Philadelphia Tribune jotting notes. We need confirmation from you. Are you the man in the video spreading tonight? Showing officers Crowley and Hale forcefully restraining a black man in a supermarket? Elijah didn't have time to respond before a screen lit up, a 90-second clip filmed on a store employee's phone, capturing the full moment he was slammed to the floor, clearly showing no resistance. The video had already made its way to Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. Over 400,000 views in just 2 hours, and pinned at the top of the post was one line, judge mistaken for suspect and cuffed for wearing a hoodie. This is America. Elijah didn't smile. He didn't feel vindicated. Only a chill was creeping up his spine, because tomorrow he'd be back in court, and the first case he would preside over in that public hearing would be the 2 men who forced his face into the supermarket floor. The next morning, Philadelphia woke to a strange kind of sunlight, murky like a white shirt that had been washed with the wrong load, neither rain nor shine. A bleak gray draped the city, as if even the air itself had fallen silent to watch the trial. Judge Elijah Brooks entered the courthouse through the side door reserved for officials. No press passes, no chasing TV cameras, only the stares of courthouse staff, who normally kept their heads down when passing him, now looked at him with a strange blend of respect and guilt. The black robe hung on his weary body like armor, forged from years of patience and anger. On his chest, a small pin in the shape of scales, quiet yet unmistakable. Not a symbol of justice, a reminder. Justice needs someone steady enough to hold it up. The assistant clerk placed a case file on the bench. She glanced at Elijah, lowering her voice. The first case today is a complaint from a citizen named Tyrone Wells. Wrongful arrest, there's video evidence. Elijah opened the file. 2 defendants, Sergeant Daniel Crowley, Officer Nathan Hale, Unit, Fairwood PD. Accusations, use of unnecessary force, baseless traffic stop, racial profiling in citizen encounters. Nothing surprising. Yet that did not stop Elijah's heart from pounding. His fingers tightened around the edge of the wooden chair. When the courtroom doors opened, 2 familiar figures entered. Crowley, face hard as stone, and Hale, pale, eyes avoiding everyone. Both in plain clothes, escorted by an older attorney, Elijah knew well from past civil suits, famous for blocking scandals like blocking storms. Elijah said nothing. He simply looked straight ahead. And when his eyes met Crowley's, something small flickered, less than a second. Crowley's smug confidence vanished, replaced by something unfamiliar. As if for the first time, the man realized he no longer stood on solid ground. The court is now in session. The defense attorney delivered his familiar argument. His clients were following procedure, acting on a suspect description, operating within the limits of the law. There is no evidence of systemic racial discrimination. At the plaintiff's side, Public Defender Rivera, young, fierce, speaking little but with weight, submitted cell phone clips from bystanders, Tyrone's store receipts, and internal radio recordings between Crowley and Hale before the stop. "We are not just witnessing one man's prejudice," she said. "We are witnessing a maintained practice, a method of selecting which citizens to stop based on race and appearance." Tyrone Wells, 27, a delivery worker, sat frozen as the video played, officers pulling him from his car for smelling marijuana inside, though later searches found nothing. His voice shook, but his words were clear. "I never thought my life could change because I got told I matched a description. Now I'm afraid to drive my kid to school. I don't know who will be next." After 3 hours of questioning, Elijah called for recess. He returned to his chambers but did not sit. He paced, like a great animal pushed to the edge of its patience. On his desk lay a stack of files. Cases once dismissed quickly. Reports from police units. Complaints he had once thought of as isolated. But, after last night, after being treated himself like those he thought the law had already protected, everything looked different. When he returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted. Not because of the lawyers or the defendants, but because of those in the back, citizens, staff, even observing officers. They no longer looked at him as a shadow on the bench, but as part of them. Elijah slowly lifted the notes. His voice was deep, not loud, but each word dropped heavy as stone. The court affirms that plaintiff Tyrone Wells had his civil rights violated, was discriminated against without just cause, and was subjected to unnecessary force. Crowley bowed his head. Hale stayed silent. The defense attorney bit his lip. But more than that, Elijah paused. The court acknowledges this was not an isolated event. It is part of a repeated pattern, maintained, and shielded by internal procedure and willful neglect. Therefore, I order. Elijah glanced down at the document he had prepared overnight. An independent investigation into all stops and arrests conducted by the Fairwood unit over the last 3 years. All affected cases are to be suspended and re-examined by an independent legal panel. The silence that followed was no longer fear. It was release. That afternoon, Elijah went home. On the table lay a bouquet of lavender he hadn't yet brought to his mother. He carried it to the hospital, placed it in her hands. She squeezed his hand, smiled softly. "I saw the news. I'm not surprised. I just worry for you." "I'm fine, Mom," Elijah said, bowing his head. "I just couldn't sit still anymore." On the hospital TV, a news report played. Philadelphia court launches investigation into systemic racial profiling in police department. Below it, an image of Elijah Brooks in his black robe, gavel in hand, eyes no longer those of a judge, but of someone who had lived, endured, and chosen not to turn back. Thanks for staying with us. If this story shook something in you, don't let it stop here. Share it, save it, speak on it, and we'll keep telling the stories that matter.